Hey everyone, today we are joined by Phil Cunningham, the visionary behind the new animated film, David. This isn't just another biblical movie, it's a global, musical, faith-filled cinematic experience, and the soundtrack has actually made history. So, Phil, let's start big. David just released the earliest full soundtrack ever for an animated musical film in modern motion picture history. Why was this music so important to release first?
Oh, that's such a great question. I think partly the answer goes back to who the story's about, which of course is David. And the cool thing about David was we know he wrote half the Psalms in the Bible. So he was authentically a musician, a songwriter, and it's so much part of his heart. And obviously, you'll see in the movie, it's so much part of the movie. So we thought it would be cool just as a front runner to the movie, just to get people, into the flow of what the movie might feel like and sound like. And it's really at the spine and the center of the movie. So we just thought it'd be really cool to start getting people connected to the movie before it's actually out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. And we'll probably get into it a little bit more, but Phil Wickham was the adult voice for David. How was that like having him play that role and share, the gift and talents that God has given him, with music to be able to connect with this character, David?
Oh, that's such an amazing question. And it was awesome working with him. Just to say, we cast very widely and we didn't select him because of marketing. We selected him because we found out so many singers actually can't act. But Phil can sing, obviously, but he's also a great actor. And then on top of that, he really brings this beautiful energy and humility and spirit of
Mm.
adventure, which is what we really wanted to come out of the David character. So he was like just the perfect fit. It's almost like he is a modern day David. So, and his work ethic is incredible. Like he's just will retake and retake and retake in the middle of a session. So it was amazing working with him. And I'll say he landed the role because just genuinely he can act well and of course he can sing well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's awesome to hear. So, your storytelling journey didn't begin in a studio, it began in the wild frontier. Would you be willing to share about that?
Of course, yeah. So for me, the journey of telling David started 37 years ago. Can you believe it? And I was canoeing down a beautiful river in Africa called the Zambezi River. And you could canoe for 4 days, 5 nights. You wouldn't see a human being, just elephant,
Wow.
buffalo. One day I was watching a beautiful lion charge across the savannah, looking up at the stars at night. For me, that's where I fell in love with God, this beautiful, adventurous heart character. And I was just like, I'm so in love with God and who He is. And I was reading David's story, and it says, I found in David, son of Jesse, a man after God's own heart.
Mm.
And it was there that the idea was like, wow, I wasn't in the movie industry at that point, but it was like, imagine if we could make a movie on David, it might give people a glimpse of God's heart. So the idea was birthed there. And then many years later, we started on our journey of starting our animation studio with the whole idea one day we had to crawl, walk, run our way towards getting towards making a David movie. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So what was happening between the time that this idea, this conception of this movie came into place and then the time where it became to like, okay, let's do this thing, let's make it.
So one of the huge things we were trying to do as once we started the animation studio over 25 years ago, we've been making the David movie for 10 years. I think our next movie will go a bit quicker. So, but just to say, in that 10 years, building towards that 10 years, I read in Michael Dell's biography, always try to work with people smarter than yourself. In the end, we worked with 400 to 500 people on the David movie in over 32 countries around the world. But
Wow.
it took a long time to build the budget and particularly build the team. And like our head of story was 20 years at Pixar, our director of photography was 20 years at DreamWorks. The guy who did our score worked on The Greatest Showman. So we just had this incredible team. So what we were doing over those 25 years was building towards the David movie and then the David movie. And a quick story I'll tell you, Janna. Jackie, my wife, and I were walking through Paris, and there was a moment of inspiration looking up at the Arc de Triomphe, because you look up at the scale of it and the attention to detail. It's like this beacon of architecture. And if you look through Paris, you've got all these office blocks and factories. And I was thinking, as a filmmaker, we could churn money and just knock out movies, or we could try and make an Arc de Triomphe that's like a beacon of inspiration. And I hope we did that. That's a beacon of inspiration to our generation, like Prince of Egypt was many, many years ago.
Yes.
Perhaps David could be to this generation. So
Yeah.
that's where we're like, we've got to do it at that scale and that level of excellence
Well,
was
I
the goal.
think I think you succeeded. This is my own 2 cents, but when I was watching the film, I was like, man, that's what it reminds me of. as the Prince of Egypt. And that movie was so well done, and there were so many great things that as I was watching David, I was like, oh man, it's like all the things I love, I loved about that they're here. And so even as an adult, I think sometimes when we see these animated films, we immediately our mind goes to, oh, it's just for
Yeah.
kids. But as an adult, I was like, wow, there was parts where I was crying. I mean, it was deeply, I think you succeeded with what you were shooting for there. It's a
Thank you.
beautiful, beautiful job. Was it ever, I mean, I'd imagine if, you're working on something, you're working towards something for that many years, that there's times where maybe it felt discouraging, that it wasn't happening, quick enough. How did you, I mean, was that the case? And if so, how did you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, that's such a great question. There were so many moments like that, so many moments of setbacks, failure, discouragement. And I was reading actually just quickly a few other people's stories in the Bible. You take Joseph, he has this dream and then he's off to slavery and off to prison. Moses has this calling and he's off to the desert for 40 years. David has an anointing, he's off to the wilderness for 7 years. So, for anyone going through that, if you find yourself in a wilderness or a desert, don't be surprised. It's part of God's plan.
Mm.
Um, but what we really realized along the journey for us was there was many moments of wilderness, but in that moment there's real humility being built, um, real perseverance being built, and then my wife's got this beautiful saying: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to, it's an African proverb actually. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think the thing that carried us through all those times is when one of you is like, "Oh my word, how's this going to work out?" or wants to give up. There's somebody else who'll say, "No, we can do it." So it was a community, it was a team that actually managed to get us there. Not one hero. It was a group of people who really believed in the vision of the Arc de Triomphe and kept encouraging each other to get there. And mostly, I'd say God was the hero of the story because he carried us when I think we were ready to give up. Yeah, but there were definitely
Yeah.
moments like that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So, what moment convinced you that this wasn't just a story that you wanted to tell, but one that you personally were called to tell?
Maybe it was, I was reading a thing of Eugene Peterson's, and he was saying when David went to fight Goliath, he was up in the mountains with God, and that's where he connected with God. And God gave him this God dominated imagination. When he went into the valley of Eli, everyone had this Goliath dominated imagination. And I think for me, just growing up in the wild, like I only watched my first movie when I was 14 years old, for example.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I think it was just connecting with God out there and feeling the call, but also realizing there's a beautiful verse that I believe in that God says He chooses the weak and foolish things of the world to shame the wise. He works with us in our weakness to do things. And I think it was just realizing, wow, that if I go down this journey, God is going to be the hero of this story. And I felt just follow that call. And my wife, Jackie, was very encouraging as well on the way and just said, like, we can do this. If God is with us, you can be against us. Let's go.
Wow.
And I was going to say, maybe it was because I was so underqualified that I was called. It wasn't because I was qualified. The other thing I'll quickly say, Janna, just out of interest, in watching the movie, I'm sure you saw, David's mother played a massive role, Nitzevet. And in one of the Psalms, he says, I serve you as my mother did. And I really hope this movie is really honoring to mothers around the world and inspiring for them. And my own mother, when I was like, my brothers and I, when we were like 14 years old, she was like, Phil, by your age, David was fighting Goliath, Daniel was in the lion's den. You need to get out there and have an adventure, with God. So she was also a very big catalyst of encouraging us to get out and take risks and, go for it. Yeah. So
Hmm.
she was also an aspect of just inspiring this movie.
And I absolutely love that y'all highlighted and included that in the film because I think it's so important I mean, like you said, I am a mother. It is honoring to mothers. And that was a special thing that, I kind of took away from the film myself. The script beautifully weaves together the quiet devotion of David's early life with the high stakes of kingdoms and battles. How did you balance, like, the intimacy and then the epic scale?
Yeah, and it was hugely challenging because, firstly, I'll just say, I was saying to the team, if you take comic book fans, you can't take Superman's cape and put it on Spider-Man. Comic book fans will get upset. How much more the faith community are going to? We want this movie to be wider than the faith community for sure, but also you want it to be deeply rooted in the source material for the faith community because they're more passionate. We are more passionate than comic book fans.
Right.
So you want the movie to be super entertaining, but you want it to be deeply rooted and connected. So we did 5 trips to Israel to do all our research. We went to the Valley of Elah,
Wow.
went to Ziglag. We studied all the fauna, the grasses, the flowers. I mean, that whole movie, every frame is literally a flower from Israel or a tree from Israel.
Wow.
So great attention to detail. And I think Disney said people will not always see the detail, but they'll feel the detail. And then in terms of that storytelling, we iterated and iterated. We worked with a Jewish rabbi, with some Christian leaders, but also a great story team like that guy from Pixar who was here. He worked there for 20 years. And I think the thing we were trying to do is just keep it. You're trying to distill it because it's a lot of his life, like we're saying, from shepherd boy to king. It's not just doesn't stop at Goliath. And we did find it very challenging, to be honest, to make it feel, to keep it authentic, but also entertaining and get the key elements. But going back to the music, I think that's where that really helped because
Oh yeah.
the music gives you a chance to really feel the character, feel the emotion. And so I think the music really helped also carry the spirit of the movie along as well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Y'all did a beautiful job with that. And that's incredible to hear too, the attention to detail that y'all had and the importance of going and visiting these places to portray it in, in a real authentic way as much as you can in an animated film. That's amazing. So, what innovation are you most proud of visually, musically, or technically in bringing this to life?
I think mostly would say what we're proud of is originally the idea of this film was for it to be a live action like a Braveheart or
Oh, wow.
Gladiator. But then we were like, well, animation's incredible because it can cross race, cultural, age, and gender barriers so well. And you take movies like The Lion King and Prince of Egypt, they last for so long. And whether you're 5 or 90 years old, you can get to the story whether you live in India or the US. So we decided to go animation, and that's why we built an animation studio. I think what we would say we're most proud of is with animation, if you go towards realism, it gets into what they call uncanny valley because it starts to look weird. But we didn't want it to be too plastic or plastic. So we moved towards realism with our characters. You've seen the movie, like Saul's hair is really detailed. And
Yeah.
so I think what I'm super proud of the team for doing is putting so much attention and care. Even the fabric, you'll see like sunspots on skins, on Saul's skin or David's skin. You'll see the attention to the hair. So I think the characters and attention to the groom and the fabric and this texture on the skin, where I think we really hopefully pushed boundaries in animation and went further perhaps than previous films. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's definitely something to be proud of. So, what did you hope audiences walk away carrying in their hearts after seeing David?
So what I really hope is that two things. That one is that they see God as got this beautiful, expansive, adventurous heart, and linked to that, David himself, as we know, was very human. He made many mistakes. He was flawed, like all of us. He was human, but what he did was he lived bravely. When had fear, he spoke out his fear. When he had questions, he said, "Why God?" Like you will have heard in the one song. When he had joy, he spoke out his joy. And so what I think he gives us permission to do is you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have your act together. He was just a normal person, but he had the courage just to step out and live. So I hope it really inspires people to take on their giants and not try to be perfect. Just be wholehearted. And then trust God as your shepherd and as your best friend. And life's going to be an adventure.
I love that so much. And I think just in my own life, there's been so many people that I've met and maybe they just became you know, they just put their belief and trust in God, they just got saved and they are like, I don't know how to pray. How do I pray? And I said, you
Yeah.
just talk to him,
Just
whatever
talk.
you're feeling,
Yeah.
just talk to him. And I've
Yeah.
shared, there's been moments of anger where I'm yelling at him, but I'm like, he's a big God and he can take that. He created us,
Mm.
he knows
Yeah.
that we're emotional. He knows that we feel deeply because he created us that way. And so when we hide that from him,
Mm.
it's like we're not even giving him the fullness of who we are and what we are in those moments. And so I said, just be real with him. It doesn't, and when you pray in public, it doesn't have to be something, it doesn't have to be something different. I'm like, it can just
Yeah.
be this from coming from this full and honest place about where you're at. Whether you're experiencing grief or whether you're in the midst of joy or anger or whatever it may be. And so I love that you said that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Love that, Jana.
So, for families watching today, maybe facing their own Goliaths, what encouragement would you offer them?
So I would say, like I was talking about, if you find yourself in a wilderness, often that's part of God's plan. It's not an accident. It's not by mistake. He is a good shepherd, and He's got your back. And the one thing I learned, just say He's your best friend as well. Quickly, just to say, Jan, one thing I learned making the David movie, I was reading a poem about a little boy who was building a sandcastle with his dad to fight the sea tide. And the sea always wins, and then he runs into the sea cottage and has hot chocolate with his dad. But what the poem is saying is, whatever we do, we're building a sandcastle with our father. But that's just a context to get to know your dad. So
Mm,
if I'm making a film, it's just a sandcastle. And yes, you can have fun and put shells and feathers on, but eventually the tides of time will come over it. But what's going to last forever is that relationship with your dad. And you learn how funny he is, how kind he is, how awesome he is. And so I'd say if you're going through a difficult time, just remember that God is your best friend, and He'll get you through the wilderness. You know, He does, and He's faithful, and you'll come out stronger for it at the end of the day. Yeah.
mm. What a sweet analogy. I love that. I'm gonna have to steal that. That's awesome. So, Phil, would you be willing to share a brief word of blessing for our viewers, especially those stepping into battles that feel, bigger than they are?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say this there's a few things. If God is for us, who can be against us? Nothing is impossible. But mainly, I'd say, I want to talk about fear. In perfect love, there's a beautiful verse in the Bible that says, in perfect love, there is no fear. And I think the key to getting to a place of no fear is understanding how great God's love is for you. And the one thing I learned on the journey is there's a verse that says, it does not depend on man's desire or effort, but on God's mercy. And I really learned to put my hope in His goodness, not my goodness, in
Mm,
His mercy, not my efforts, not even my desire, because one day it's up, one day it's down. But He's there, He's always there, He's your best friend. And so the word of blessing would be, yeah, God is your best friend. He's your shepherd. And actually, the one word I read with shepherd, it's similar to friend. Like He's your shepherd, but He's also your good friend.
mm.
And with that, you can take on the world. You can do anything. Nothing's impossible. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. So, where can everyone check out David? How can they support the film?
Thank you. So the best place to go to is angel.com/David. So it's angel.com/David is the best place to go and find information, and can even buy tickets there for the cinema. And I'll just say it's really been shot for cinema, like the whole way the music's done, the framing of the camera. So if you can get to watch it in cinema, it's a beautiful experience if you can afford it and can get there. It's really wonderful to watch it in cinema. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll have to go check it out in the theaters. That's awesome. All right. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Phil. I know our audience is going to be blessed by watching this and hearing about your story and your encouragements. And I hope that y'all have continued great success with this film. And just want to say thank you for thank you for the journey that you've shared a little bit of today. But also, I mean, just for pushing through and continuing to work, you and your team push through the hard times to make this film happen, because I know it's going to be, like you said, something that lasts, much past your life or my life, but that's going to be able to bless and encourage and educate people for years to come. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Jenna. Really enjoyed being with you. Thank you so much.